on this computer. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. Let's start with your questions.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Shlomi, go ahead.
I saw news earlier today that left my friend Carol and I astounded. Did the joint list really join the Knesset's majority party?
No. The joint list did not join well, first, there is no majority. I mean, there's nothing. Okay, let's start this way. Let's start with the last part of your question, this last thing that you said first, okay? And then we'll go backwards. Okay, there is no coalition in the Knesset. There was, and there's no joint list. Okay, so those two things didn't happen. The joint list was, maybe there's like I don't think they're called the joint list anymore. I don't know. The joint list was a collection of all three, maybe four Arab parties, and the reason why they joined to create the joint list was because after 3 elections ago, Israel had made a new rule, which was meant to get the Arabs out of the Knesset, and also ironically enough, the religious Zionists, the two like extremes of the polar ends of the Knesset parties, to get them out of the Knesset, because and the way they were going to do that was by saying you need to get a certain amount of votes to get in. Okay, so that by raising that up, they would they can get smaller parties out. That's how they usually do it. Okay? And they do that every once in a while. They keep doing that. They should really do it much higher than it is now. It's a little crazy how few votes you have to get into the Knesset as a party. So the Arab parties, each on their own, would never have enough votes. But if they joined together, then not only would they have enough votes to make the Knesset, but they would actually become, I think they were like the second or third highest party in the Knesset. So that's what they did 2 times ago. Then one of the parties, Ra'am, this election split off. And the reason why they split off is because their leader, whose ironically last name is Abbas, Mansour Abbas. So Mansour Abbas said, you know what? This is a little ridiculous. We're just going to keep sitting here saying Israel doesn't treat the Palestinians properly, and then we don't get anything. Like, we have no political power. We're not getting services because we're always sitting in the opposition. So when we want stuff for our towns and there's a vote, so obviously the vote always goes against us because we're always in the opposition. So imagine now if instead of going the opposition, we actually joined the ruling coalition with the Zionists. And then when it came time for like bargaining, our towns got money. That would be great. So that was his idea. And lo and behold, a lot of Arabs said, hey, you know what? Enough of this stupid resistance on behalf of these guys on the other side of the green line who can't get their acts together. It's basically the same logic of all the Arab countries in the Abraham Accords. Basically saying, like, enough. Palestinians keep making bad decisions. Why should we suffer because they keep making bad decisions? So now we have to suffer because of them? That's stupid. So that's what that's basically what they said. And now he could play, I mean, he can't play kingmaker, but what he can do, and what he did tonight, big time, was he can go to Netanyahu and say, this is what I want to join the coalition. And he can, if he would join in with Netanyahu, Netanyahu would have the majority. Now, in order for him to join in, Smotrich, who's the head of the religious Zionists, who Netanyahu also needs, would have to agree. And lo and behold, Smotrich will not sit with the Arab parties. Could have something to do with his opinion that all Arabs should leave Israel. So that's his, So having them in the Knesset as part of the governing coalition is not what Smotrich had intended. Okay, so that's the issue. But if they can get past that, so then that's what they would do. So no one joined the coalition. What you might have seen and misunderstood, but I don't think so, because it would be strange to get that so different than what it came out, is there's a committee on the Knesset that makes the rules over the next couple of weeks until there's a governing coalition, if there's a governing coalition. And that committee, Ra'am is a part of. They get one seat on that committee, and they were the deciding vote that now puts it in anti-Netanyahu. They back somebody else. So the committee is anti-Netanyahu, which could have effects if they ever wanted to pass. I'm trying to remember what law could help Netanyahu form a coalition. I don't remember what it is, but they could. Oh, they were going to make a law that I don't remember, something about being like an indicted prime minister can't. I don't know, something like that. So it didn't go in his favor. Let's put it that way. Okay. Got it? That helped that understand? Yeah. Okay, good. But it could very well be, by the way, that an Arab party could be around, will join a coalition. Very, very possible, especially a left-wing coalition. That's definitely possible. But he's open to it. And Naftali Bennett, who's right-wing, said that he would sit with the Arabs in the Knesset. So everybody didn't see that one coming. Then Naftali Bennett said it would be okay. And he said he's fine. He said he would do it. No problem. Okay. Who's got the next question? Jordan.
So back in 2018, the Knesset passed this thing called the Basic Law, or sometimes called the nation state law. And one of the things it did is it changed the status of Arabic, like among, like language-wise, like among other things. A lot of people have said that it damaged the rights of Arab Israelis. Is that true?
Nope. Well, it's true that people say that. Yes, that's definitely true.
Well, like, do you think it does, or does it not?
In fact, I like turning to people that tell me that and saying, okay, tell me a way that laws are practical, right? That's all they matter. If you pass a law that's not practical, it's not a law because it doesn't affect anybody, right? If I pass a law that on the 8th day of the week, everybody must wear green polka dots, it doesn't matter because you might say, well, I never want to wear polka dots. Well, don't worry, because there's no 8 days of the week, so you don't have to worry. It's never going to be practical, right? Stupid laws are stupid, right? You could pass a law that on the 8th day of the week, Jews have no rights in America. Okay, if any Jew complained about that law, they'd be stupid because that makes no sense. Who cares, right? Doesn't matter if you have a impractical law. Okay, so whenever anybody tells me that it's called the nation-state law, okay, it's called in English, the nation-state law, which essentially says Israel doesn't have a constitution. So this is like the closest thing that they've gotten to a constitution. It essentially enshrines the fact that Israel is a Jewish state. Okay, great. It practically does absolutely nothing. There is absolutely nothing practically that the law does. Not for Arabs, not for Jews, nothing. It has no practical ramifications whatsoever. So that's when people tell me like, oh, it's a racist law. Arabs love calling it a racist law. And Arab advocates, and especially Palestinian advocates, in America love calling it a racist law because no one has any idea what it is, right? And they love saying like, oh, it makes Arabs second-class citizens and it makes Arabs they don't have as many rights as Jews. I'm like, okay, fine. So tell me one practical difference from the day before the law was passed to the day after the law was passed. You can't.
Well, didn't it change Arabic from like one of the national languages to special status language?
Oh, Arabic, we don't have national languages. It didn't change anything. And even if it did change that, what's the practical difference? Every street sign here has Arabic.
It's not, like, when it's not a main language anymore, it's like, I don't know. It's like language is ethnicity.
What's the national language of America?
English, right?
Nope, there is none.
No?
Nope, there's no national language of America. Most countries don't have a national language because what does that even mean? To have a national language? Means you have to speak English to be a citizen? Clearly not, right? And you don't have to speak Hebrew, right? Ask Rafi, he lives in Granada. Nobody speaks Hebrew there.
I mean,
we all speak Arabic, and that's why.
Right. So it made Arabs feel horrible, especially Druze. Druze who serve in the army, do everything else, looked at this law and they're like, what the heck? What did we do? Why are you making us feel horrible? And it was so stupidly done. They could have easily written one line that says we Arabs are equal citizens and we love Arabs and they could have done that, but no, God forbid you should do that because that would have been smart. So instead of doing that and adding that one line, which also would have had no practical difference whatsoever, nothing, right? No practical difference. They didn't do it and then caused the whole storm to come down on them and will never end this storm. This storm will never end. This Arab party that we were talking about a minute ago, one of their key planks of their party, and one of the things they're going to demand to go into a governing coalition is the taking back of that law. And what's the difference? Nothing. So we're all going to have a stupid argument over a dumb law that has no practical difference, and whether or not we should keep the law or not. But anytime somebody says to you, well, what about the nation state law? Clearly shows Jewish supremacy in Israel. You'd be like, okay, so tell me, how does an Arab suffer from nation state law? Like, oh, Arab's not an official language. Okay, I like to go with America. What's America's official language? Then I like to go, does that mean that Arabs can't speak Arabic? No. Does that mean that forms aren't in Arabic in Israel? Nope, they're all in Israel. They're all in Arabic. These street signs aren't in Arabic? Nope, they're in 3 different languages, all of them. Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Does that mean that you can't go to court and speak Arabic? Nope, you can speak Arabic in court, no problem. So there's no real difference, at all. 0, none, zilch. Okay. Next question. Raf.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the Congresswoman McCullen, but I don't know if you wanted to talk about that first.
We can ask about that. I've been talking about her all day long.
Yeah, so my question is, and I say this with respect to her and to the
You
bill,
don't have to
and
show her respect. She's lost all rights to respect.
Whatever and I think that's the point. It's that that she has, she's introduced this bill. She introduces a lot of bills. In the last Congress, 16,000 bills were introduced.
She hasn't introduced a lot of bills. She introduced the same bill a lot of times.
Yes. Okay. And I'm sorry about that. But
let me just interrupt you for a second. One shows productivity, the other shows OCD or hatred of Jews.
Right. Sure. But that's a point. When she reintroduced this bill, all the major Jewish organizations and newsletters, Jewish Insider, JNS, all of them, they all wrote pieces about it. But who cares? This bill has 4 co-sponsors. No, none of those members of Congress are popular, nor is she. She was rated one of the least effective members of Congress. So who really cares if she introduces yet another bill that targets anti-Israel? Isn't it just the same thing as what you were talking about before? Sure, it might be bad, but nothing will ever actually happen. So isn't it just symbolism?
Yeah, so let's give a little background so everybody else can catch up on what Rafi's talking about. There is a member of Congress in Minnesota named Betty McCullen. Okay, she's Congresswoman Betty McCullen. You have never heard of her. Okay, she is a do-nothing member of Congress. She's been a member of Congress since 2001. It's very hard to find anything that she's actually accomplished in her time in Congress. I'm sure some of her constituents had trouble getting a passport or something, and she helped them. But there's nothing you could really find about her. She was a very nice woman. Everything was very good until 2006. In 2006, an AIPAC member walked into her office and was incredibly rude to her. Okay, incredibly rude to her. And literally just called her like a terrorist supporter or something. I don't know what happened. And there, an AIPAC guy had a lobbying mission, like we had lobbying meetings, and it went horribly wrong. And she was incredibly insulted, and she demanded an apology. She wrote this letter that you can find online. If you just type her name and write AIPAC letter, you can find the letter that she wrote to Howard Kaur, the head of AIPAC. And in it, she says, I'm coming after you. This guy refuses to apologize. I didn't get an apology. I'm coming after you. And since then, she has been the most anti-Israel member of Congress. Now, there are only about 10 members of Congress that are anti-Israel. Okay, back when she was around, there was 2. So you can imagine how popular she was among her friends in Congress when she's going around with this, all these anti-Israel bills, be like, sign this. And they're like, are you out of your mind? Get out of here. We're pro-Israel. That's welcome to the United States Congress. Israel's our ally. So, we're not going to sign your little stupid bill if we're also sending them $3 billion a year. So that's not going to happen. But every year, she decided to try to come up with a bill that would be bad for Israel. So Then she came up with a great idea. Instead of coming up with new bills every year, just put the same bill down every single year. And the bill is a bill against the detainment of Palestinian minors, which when you say against the detainment of Palestinian minors, and then you translate that into colloquial English, against the jailing of Palestinian children, you begin to imagine a 4-year-old child who's in handcuffs and a big bad Israeli judge sits there and says, "You're going to jail for life." Okay, so that's clearly not happening in Israel. There's no jail, there's no juvenile preschool in Israel where you have 4-year-old children. Okay, what you do have, are 16, 17, 14-year-old terrorists who have murdered Jews and they go to jail, or they've attacked a soldier and they go to jail. Now, in any society, including Minnesota, okay, if you are a teenager and you kill somebody, you're going to jail. If you're a teenager and you stab somebody, you're going to jail. If you're a teenager and throw a boulder through somebody's windshield, you're going to jail. If you're a teenager in America and you steal something sufficiently large enough, you're going to jail for stealing. It does not mean, now you might go to a juvie jail, but you're going to jail. They're not going to simply sit there and say, "Wow, we didn't realize that teenagers can get into stores in the middle of the night and take 5 big screen TVs and sell them." Or, "Look at that, teenagers can sell crack on the corner of their streets just as well as adults can. So, but you know what, we're going to give you a no, and then you can go home." No. America actually is one of the only countries that executes minors. Okay, yes, let me repeat that. Executes minors. America kills children who commit heinous enough crimes. Okay, so Betty McCullen sits there and says, no, what we should do is Palestinian children should never be arrested, ever. That's wrong. They should never be not only arrested, her bill refuses to allow American money to go for detaining Palestinian children, which would mean that if you had a Palestinian child standing on a mountaintop, dropping boulders down onto school buses, and if you think that's crazy, that happened to my daughter's school bus, okay? So it's not little tiny rocks. They're picking up boulders and dropping them off of 2-story mountains as school buses drive by, okay? So the police, according to Betty McCullen's bill, the Israeli police should not be allowed to stop them. I'll repeat that. I mean, they could stop them if they confiscated all the rocks, but they wouldn't be able to stop the teenager from throwing the rocks. That would be wrong. If the teenager is 16, 17 years old and a minor, and he has a boulder, the police officer would say it would be allowed, according to her bill, to take the rock away from the teenager, but not say, to, like, grab the teenager's arm and say, "Hey, don't throw that boulder down on that old lady passing down below you." Okay, that they couldn't do, because doing that is now. I wrote an op-ed. I wrote it on Friday and then published it today. Yeah, I'll show it to you. This is second here. Here, so this is the op-ed. Okay, this is a Palestinian teenager. He's a very good-looking kid, right? 16 years old in the picture. Okay, sweet kid. This kid should not be arrested. His house was demolished. Now, that's the type of kid that Betty McCullen's, right? His name is Khalil Yusufa Alai Jabaran. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And this type of kid should not be in jail. This kid got up in the morning one morning in a sunny September 2.5 years ago, and waited outside a supermarket. And then my friend, who was a father of 4 children, was coming out of the supermarket carrying 2 shopping bags, and Khalil stabbed him in the back, okay, and murdered him. So that's sweet Khalil. Betty McCullen's bill would make sure that American aid could not be used in the jailing or stopping or catching of Khalil. Now, the good news is that American aid wasn't used in the catching of Khalil, because before my friend died, he shot Khalil, which stopped him from murdering other people. And my friend died a hero. My friend, by the way, in case you don't know the case, is Ari Fold. So that's the case of Khalil. So to think for a second that people like Khalil shouldn't be imprisoned is ludicrous. So I point out in this op-ed, and if you want, I can post it for you guys. You can see it on my Facebook, or just go to Times of Israel to the blog section, and then you can see that in Betty McCullen's own district, there are many minors who are in jail because they've committed crimes, and that's the law. And U.S. taxpayers are paying for that, obviously. Okay, and in the Palestinian Authority, they not only do they jail teenagers, but they jail teenagers and don't give them lawyers, which came from an anti-Israel NGO that pointed out that Palestinian security forces are much worse than Israel. But Betty McCullen is not advocating for taking away American funding from Minnesota police, and she's not advocating for taking away American aid to the Palestinian Authority. In fact, she's asking for an increase in aid to Palestinian Authority. So when you put everything up on a chart and say, okay, here's our chart. When it comes to, I don't know why I'm doing this because there's no chart here, but let's imagine that for Israel, we say minors that commit terror, no jail. Minors that kill in Minnesota, jail. Minors that kill the Palestinians, jail. Who should get federal dollars? Not them. Yes, yes. What's the one factor that differentiates them? I'll leave that for you to guess. I don't know what it is. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wants to scream, well, she must be an anti-Semite. I don't think she's an anti-Semite. I think she hates pro-Israel community because they insulted her years ago and she still hasn't gotten her apology. I think she's a witch of a woman, which is why she has no friends in Congress and why, as Rafi pointed out, nobody will sponsor the bill. So in that case, you have to ask the question. If nobody ever sponsors this bill, she gets 5-6 co-sponsors a year. I think last year she got 10 or 12 because you've got the new progressive wing inside Congress. But this bill has no chance of passing. So every year she drops in what's called a hopper. That's like this little thing in Congress where you put the bills. And it never even gets assigned to a committee because the committee never looks at it because no committee chairman wants to touch this thing. Right? I don't know if you know the process of how a bill works. If you paid attention in 6th grade in social studies class, or in Rafi's case, in the classes that his father put together because Rafi didn't have those classes. So when you put a bill in, you literally drop the bill in something called a hopper. It's like this big thing in Congress. And then it gets sent to the speaker's office, really the majority whip's office, and they go through it and see which bills should go to a committee, and they sign them to committee. Usually bills like this, there are like 6,000 bills that get proposed every year, and we pass like 30 laws a year, okay? So where do the other 5,970 bills go? Into the garbage, okay? Because nobody wants to see them, okay? Nobody wants them passed. This one, it probably got lost in the hopper, so they didn't even make it to the garbage. Because it's never going to get to committee because nobody supports this in Congress. And no one's going to support it this time. It's going to get maybe 10 co-sponsors. Because not only is the bill anti-Israel, the bill is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous bill. If she actually wanted something, she could pass the bill. Like, you could help her write a bill that would actually hurt Israel, that would have a chance of passing. You could write one of these bills. So this is why she's so ineffective, because she writes these crazy bills over and over and over that are just ludicrous. No one's going to sit there and say, no matter what, children shouldn't go to jail. No matter what, doesn't matter what they do. Does not make a difference. A child lights cats on fire and then lights a baby on fire, that child should be in school the next day. No reason not to put that child in school. Maybe talk to the child. Re-educate the child. That's what you should re-educate. That's what somebody left a comment on the blog. They shouldn't be jailed. They should be re-educated. That word doesn't mean anything. You don't care. China re-educates the Muslims in concentration camps. That's the word for re-education. That's where it comes from. I don't know how you re-educate a child. I'm an educator. I've never re-educated a child. The word doesn't mean anything. It's a made-up word. You don't re-educate people. So what are you going to do with a child, right? So nobody would sit there and be like, all children, no matter what they do, should go and be free. Okay. That's ludicrous and absurd, and a way of making sure society is completely ineffective and backwards. So no one's going to support this bill at all. What's the difference this year? As we say in the bill hazeh mikol or shana zu mikol shana, right? Okay, so what's the difference between this year and all other years? This year, she is the chairwoman of the committee. So it's actually going to go to a committee. How's it going to go to a committee? Because she's going to skip the hopper. She's going to sign it to herself. And then it'll go to committee, and that's where it'll die. Because she's not going to get the votes in her own committee. She's going to sit there. But what she can do as a committee chairperson, she can call witnesses. And she can bring in tons of NGOs and have everybody talk about how bad Israel treats its children in jail, okay? And they can talk about this over and over, how this child was tortured in jail and that child was tortured in jail. Now, all this stuff, you could have mass torture going on in Israeli jails. It could be. Let's say we have a jail in the West Bank somewhere. We send all the Palestinian children there and we torture them. Okay, let's say we hang them up by their toes and we whip them and do all sorts of horrible things to Palestinian children. How would you know? How would you know? If Israel is doing that, are they inviting the NGOs that hate Israel in to watch this happen? No. Are there tons of Israeli security guards going, yes, I can't live with myself anymore. I've tortured Palestinian children, and now I need to tell the world. No, there's no Israeli security. No one said that. That's never happened, okay? It's never happened because they've never tortured children. But set that aside. You don't have that. So what's the only way you have this happening? The children are coming out of this jail and saying they strung me up and then they tortured me, okay? That's how it happened. Now, this is a little circumspect, okay? Slightly circumspect because there's no corroborating evidence of this happened. What you have is children who are claiming this, and it's not even children, it's the NGOs. You don't have children coming out with all these things and making these claims. Okay, so that's the story. So she can cause a lot of ruckus, and it can sound very mean. So what we need to do is we need to shut up right at the start, right? Right at the start, you have to. And how do you do that best? So the best way of doing that would be by bringing out all the people, all these voices that say there's no torture going on. Now, I have a question for you. How do you have people say there's no torture? Jordan, could you prove to me right now that in your house you're not torturing children?
Like right now?
Right
I mean,
now.
I would probably just like take a camera around and then show you lack of torture instruments, that everything looks okay.
Maybe there's a hidden torture room. You're not going to show us that room, obviously, on your Zoom camera. You're going to skip the torture chamber.
Right. Well, then, not really, but I guess I could like invite you to come look for yourself.
But maybe the room isn't behind the hidden door. There's not going to be a sign on the door that says torture chamber.
Right.
You cannot use what's called empirical evidence, which is what using your senses to prove a negative. Doesn't work. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove that you're not doing something. How can you possibly prove that you're not doing something? You can't. Doesn't work. It's logically impossible. Cannot do it, right? It's absolutely impossible. So you can't prove that you're not torturing children. So Israel can't come out. You cannot, the defenders of Israel, we cannot come out and say, we're not torturing children. Can't. All you can say is, prove that we are torturing children. And then what's the answer? Well, of course we can't prove that you're torturing children because you're not letting us into the torture jails. In which case you're going to want to bang your head against the wall over and over and torture yourself, because this conversation will go nowhere, which is why it's such a fascinating accusation to make, because it cannot be disproven and it can't be proven. So she can just go on and on and on and talk about how Israel abuses children. And that's exactly what she's going to do for as long as she's a member of Congress and probably afterwards.
But as chair, wouldn't, like, it's not a court system, but doesn't the burden of proof fall upon her to find the evidence of torture? I mean, if she wants to actually have,
it's not a trial. She's just got to. What she's saying is, and if I would be her, I would say, listen, I don't know for sure it's happening, but I do want to pass a law that says that no American aid should go to the torture and imprisonment of children.
But then you're creating a false equivalency, aren't you?
Oh, you're creating many false equivalencies. That's the point, right? That's her goal. Her goal is not to pass a law. Her goal is to get this out there that Israel is torturing children, because Israel to this day has never proven the fact that they're not torturing children. Right? Hasn't proven that. So it also hasn't proven the fact that it's not oppressing Palestinians. It also hasn't disproven the fact that it's not creating ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. You can't disprove these things because they're undisprovable. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's the beauty of these accusations. Tell me, Jordan, when did you stop beating your little sister?
When did I stop eating my sister?
Did you just say you beat your little sister? That's horrible. That's the type of accusations that they're using. See that? Classic example. Okay, you can't disprove that. In fact, you just talked about it. So that's the trap that they fall into. So how do you stop these accusations? How do you stop it, right? So you don't stop it by saying Israel doesn't torture children. What you do is show how absolutely absurd it is to write a bill this way. And that's what my op-ed does. My op-ed says, okay, you're against jailing children? Well, that makes no sense. Because everybody jails children, because some children are very, very bad. They're bad apples. I don't know if they're created that way for psychology. I don't know if their parents told them to do bad things. I don't know if they live in a society that names schools after terrorists and street corners after terrorists and pays terrorists lots of money. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, some children become terrorists. I don't know how they got that idea, but maybe that's what's the problem in Palestinian society, where they honor terrorists, that some of their children become terrorists. That's where I would say the blame lies. So in any case, that's my point. Okay, so that was a question and one of the things we were supposed to cover. Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions? No other questions. Okay, so let's go to what we were going to talk about tonight. Let us see. Okay. Let's see. Where's NCSY in my thing? Okay, your questions did that. Oh, J Street Conference. Oh, this is big. This is important. Okay. The J Street Conference is going on now. J Street Conference is like a small APAC conference. Small, in fact, that it's small in quality of ideas and small in the amount of people that attend. Okay. J Street is a lobbying organization that was started about 10 years ago by more left-wingers, and then they call themselves pro-Israel, pro-peace. It's a ridiculous type of thing because it's not who's pro-Israel and anti-peace. Can you show me which camp is exactly the pro-Israel, anti-peace camp? Which one is that? Is that because I know I go to APAC and they always talk about peace. Even ZOA, which is a very right-wing Israel lobbying group, they always talk about peace. So please tell me who's the pro-Israel, pro-violence lobby that J Street is trying to answer. There's none. So J Street this year's headliner for their conference, the big speaker, was Mahmoud Abbas, who started his wonderful, illustrious academic career by writing his PhD thesis on Holocaust denial, and then moved on to becoming it's Dr. Mahmoud Abbas, who actually got his PhD in Moscow University on showing how the Holocaust was not as bad as Jews would like to make you claim, and 6 million people did not die in the Holocaust. Yes, you can get a PhD in writing false theories. Okay, so that's Mahmoud Abbas, our moderate partner in peace, who has refused to negotiate peace for 10 years, which if you think that was impressive, he's also refused to have elections in 15 years, and also dedicates $300 million of his annual budget to paying terrorists in a pay-for-slay program, which he calls welfare. which is a nice way of calling it. And also, as an academic, has done what all teachers dream of having the ability to do, which is embezzle hundreds of millions of dollars of foreign aid into his own pockets, which is why he's worth $200 million, and all of his kids are worth that as well. And if you really want to see what Mahmoud Abbas is all about, just simply Google images Mahmoud Abbas presidential palace, and you'll see where the money goes. Okay, so that's Mahmoud Abbas is their headline speaker of the pro-Israel, pro-peace conference. What's the big difference between J Street and, let's say, AIPAC, for instance? Okay, because J Street was really an answer to AIPAC of people that were sick of AIPAC, and it really comes down to one basic difference. Okay, one very basic difference, and that is the following. J Street believes firmly that the United States of America should dictate, and all Americans should dictate to Israel what it should do. AIPAC does not. Okay, so before you get into the issues and the positions that they take, AIPAC's basic line is Israel is its own country. AIPAC does not represent Israel, and AIPAC does not tell Israel, does not prescribe to Israel what it should do. J Street believes that American pressure should be brought down on Israel to change it, what a lot of their proponents call tough love. And Congress should be utilized to put that pressure on. So if you believe that Israel should be doing something different than it's currently doing, then then you should go to your member of Congress and say, hey, you should withhold money from Israel or condition aid to Israel until Israel does what we think it should do. That is the exact opposite position of AIPAC. When Israel decided to build settlements, AIPAC defended Israel. When Israel decided to pull out of those settlements in Gaza, AIPAC defended Israel. Okay, AIPAC simply says America and Israel are better off when they're partners. So whatever the elected officials, the democratically elected officials of Israel decide to do, right, because they have the support of their people, that's what America should support, because it's a democratic process. We're not supporting a dictator. We're supporting if Israel continues to decide to elect Bibi Netanyahu, you might hate Bibi Netanyahu, but he's the guy they chose. So he's the one that's there, okay? So if he's the prime minister, or Ehud Barak is the prime minister, or Ehud Olmert's the prime minister, whoever is going to be the prime minister, that's who they're going to support, okay? J Street has a very defined left-leaning position, which said, right, they invited Elizabeth Warren tonight, did something that is unbelievable, completely unacceptable. But in J Street, she gets a standing ovation, which you see, she said that Israel should be encouraged to oust Bibi Netanyahu as prime minister, just like America ousted Donald Trump. Okay, that is incredible domestic interference. If somebody said that in J Street, in AIPAC, it wouldn't make a difference if everybody in AIPAC hated Bibi Netanyahu. That doesn't matter. You don't do that. You don't interfere in another country's elections. You cannot do that. That's a line not crossed, especially an ally. So that's the difference. Now, J Street has done some things in the past which are well past the differences that we're saying. Okay, we're back. I don't know if I was frozen there or what, but when Israel was defending itself against rocket attacks from Gaza, J Street came out and criticized Israel for that. Okay, and said that Israel was too heavy-handed in Gaza. J Street backed the Goldstein report, which accused Israel of committing war crimes in Gaza and did not criticize Hamas at all. Okay, and J Street proved that. Goldstein himself, who was the one that wrote the report afterwards, said that it was too biased against Israel, but J Street stood up and supported it and has yet to renege on that support, yet to say that it was a mistake. And as the author of the report said it was a mistake, but J Street still backs the report that the author itself says it's so J Street is consistently not supportive of Israel. In fact, it's very hard to find the time that J Street says anything positive about Israel. So that's the very big difference between them. And there's a lot of other differences that we can go into over and over. Okay, but that's the essential difference. So this week was J Street's conference. Okay, its annual conference this year was virtual. They usually get about 4,000 people. I doubt they're ever gonna announce when they're how many people actually attended, because I can't imagine it's going to be a high number. How many people are willing to watch Zoom a year and a half after Corona started of more and more online content? So they'll watch they'll watch the big speakers, but they're not going to watch anything else. Okay, so that is that's the idea. Good. Okay.
Just one question about this is I was just looking at some of the speakers they had, and some of them are obviously wackos, but there are some some members of Congress who have been pro-Israel who really are fine people, and why do they speak in? Well, why do they get invited, and why do they accept those invitations?
So the real question is, why do they accept the invitation? They get invited because J Street loves it when they get invited. So it used to be that nobody would speak there. It used to be it was place time. Then J Street started giving out lots of money, and then people, that's what they started doing. So that's the idea. So people go, and they're also within progressive circles. Here's the problem in the Democratic Party, as you guys know, we talk about this a lot. In the Democratic Party, you have a split going on between the progressives and the establishment Democrats, and this is something probably the greatest insight that you can see what's going on in the Democratic Party and what's really leading the Biden administration both domestically and in foreign policy as well. Okay, so but Joe Biden is doing it, and he's actually doing an amazing job. I mean, like this is really like he's really doing like a really great job at this. What he's doing is he's giving enough attention to the progressives that they can't attack him for ignoring him. Okay, but he's not actually doing anything that they want to do. Right. So what is he? Let's take the Palestinians as an example. What do the progressives want? They want aid to Israel stopped. They want America to recognize a Palestinian state. And they want the Biden administration to essentially restart everything with the Palestinians and increase it. And on a scale, lower it to Israel, right? So raise the Palestinians, lower Israel, okay? That's essentially what they want. So what does Joe Biden do? He announces that he's reinstituting aid to Palestinian NGOs. So of course the progressives are going to say it's not enough, right? But at the same time, right, they can't say he's doing nothing, right? Because he's reversing Trump's positions, okay? But he's not doing anything that really gets pro-Israel people upset. Yeah, the Trump people are upset, but he doesn't care about them. They're not going to support him. It doesn't matter. But the Ted Deutsches and the Richie Torreses and the I don't know, whoever the other Chuck Schumers are not getting upset at all about what Joe Biden's doing on Israel, right? In fact, they're supporting him. So he's doing just enough of one without doing too much and making sure everybody's happy. It's very good. And the progressives have no idea that it's going on, right? They on some of the domestic issues, they're realizing it, But on the foreign policy, they have no clue that they're being played. And he's doing a wonderful job, a wonderful, wonderful job. The difference, and with this will end, the difference will be when it comes to the Iran deal. Let's see what they give up on the Iran deal. Let's see what he does on the Iran deal, because progressives want him to give up everything, and we'll see and the establishment does not. So we'll see where he ends up on that one. That'll be very interesting. Okay, folks, next week we might be lobbying. Who knows? We'll see, okay? I'll let you guys know, obviously. Have a great week, guys.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.